steps and the process could take. So I saw this story today, and this really ties in nicely with what I was just saying. California is the future of the country. This is a state that used to be like utopia, and it should be. It is one of the nation's biggest states. It's one of the biggest economies in the country. It's got lots of natural resources. It's got beautiful topography, beautiful landscape, perfect weather. It's got multiple industries that are industries of the future that aren't going away, industries like Hollywood and Silicon Valley. So they've got technology, they've got entertainment, they're connected to the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and so they can trade with Asia, which is where all the emerging markets are. They have like everything going for them, and yet two things are happening. Number one is that Governor Gavin Newsom is being recalled because the state is so bad. And number two, the census results just came out today, and they show that California is losing a congressional seat for the first time in American history because the population has shrunk. And we all know the population in California is shrinking because people are fleeing the state. They are fleeing all across the country, fleeing to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Arizona, anywhere except for California. And we'll get to that particular part in a minute. But the question has to be asked, if California has all this going for it, most populous, biggest state, connected to the emerging markets, it's got Silicon Valley, Hollywood, the weather's beautiful, the scenery is beautiful, diverse climate conditions, you could go north and get all kinds of different things and go south and get different things. Population boom from Latin America, there's maybe some foreshadowing there. It used to be utopia. What went wrong? Well, we all know what went wrong. Some people say that the problems in America, the reason that America is getting worse in the way that it is because of bad governance. Republicans blame it on Democrats. Democrats blame it on Republicans. Republicans say that Democrats ignore the Constitution. They're getting away from our foundational principles. They say that Democrats tax too much and spend too much money. They say that socialism, the failed ideology of the 20th century that ruined Russia and Eastern Bloc countries, is now coming to our shores and ruining America. But California wasn't always that way. Ronald Reagan won 4 statewide elections in California, twice as governor, twice as president. George Bush won in California. California used to be a Republican state. Nixon won in California. So what exactly happened there? If it wasn't for Republican policies, why did we get the Democrats in the first place? Well, we know that it went from a Republican utopia, and maybe you could say a white Republican utopia, that, to a Democratic dystopia because of the population change, because of the population replacement. Even if you were to blame it on the policies, who brought the policies to California, a once Republican state? It was the amnesty for illegal immigrants and the influx of many legal immigrants from Latin America, as we all know, in the southern half of the state that transformed the electorate in California. It was mass immigration from Latin America and from Asia, both legal and illegal, which completely changed the electorate. Whereas at one time you had people that could go Republican or Democrat. For close to 30 years now, we know California only ever goes Democratic. And it's not even close. And we know that if anything, it's only getting more Democratic and not less. And that's because the population has been completely replaced. Whereas at one time you had white people in California who may judiciously decide whether or not they want to vote for a Republican or a Democrat based on the policies. Now you have pro-mass migration, pro-white dispossession, revolutionary liberal immigrants coming from non-white countries, coming from South Central America and Mexico, and coming from India, China, and other Asian countries, people that reliably vote Democratic. Asians vote more than 75% Democratic. Hispanics have historically voted more than 60% Democratic. And we know that at least with Asians, their second generation actually are more liberal than the first generation. And that continues on down the line. So we could blame it on the policies, but we could also just blame it on the people too. When you look at LA, when you look at some of the places in Southern California, what do you see a lot of? You see a lot of homeless encampments, drug abuse, crime, turf wars between rival gangs. I know that we don't see a lot of these problems in Malibu. I know that we don't see a lot of these problems in the northern part of the state. We tend to see these problems in the ethnic enclaves, particularly the Hispanic and Black ethnic enclaves in the state, which is the genesis of all the problems. And so you look at the past 30 years, and California went from maybe the best country, or rather the best state in the country to be in, economically, weather, quality of life, everything, to a state that people are fleeing and the government is being overthrown because of massive demographic change. Here's the worst part. California has been ruined because of the demographic change and because of the ensuing political consequences of that. But they're both equally responsible. And people are fleeing because it's gotten so bad, and now they're going to places where, obviously, those kinds of people don't live, and where those kinds of policies have not been implemented. Naturally, if California has been ruined by a certain class of people and by a certain kind of governance, if people are leaving California, they're going to go to a place where they don't have those people and they don't have those policies, which is the white Republican governed states like Tennessee, like Arizona, like Montana, Idaho, Texas, Wyoming, Florida, South Carolina, anywhere except for California. And what's the consequence of this? People are leaving California, and just like people leave India, and just like people leave Nicaragua and come to California, and they don't know how to create a nice society, the people that are now leaving California and going to all these other places they're not going to create a nice place where they are either. They're not going to create or perpetuate a nice place in their new home. So whether you have people that are from Asia or Latin America picking up and now moving to another state like locusts, or whether it's white liberals doing the same thing, this pestilence is now spreading across to the entire country. And as such, in everywhere else in the country, we are going to get the same kinds of conditions. If you look at California and say, wow, I sure am glad I don't live there. I sure am glad I don't have to worry about homeless people, fecal matter, hypodermic needles, gang warfare, drug crime, and all of that, typhus. When I'm walking through my city center, because my state isn't like that, we don't have people like that here, and we don't have governance like they have over there, well, think again. As long as you are untouched by the diversity, as long as you are untouched by the globalist corruption, you are a target. Because it's not really a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's a matter of how long is it going to take them to burn through every other place? How long is it going to take them to burn through every other nice, hospitable place in this country before they arrive at your place? Because what they did in California, they brought in all these people that wrecked the state, and now the state is unlivable. Even though it's one of the best places ever. It's got way more going for it than a lot of places in the country. So they're going to pick up, and then let's say they go to Florida. What do you think they're going to do there? Florida works in some places. Let's use a better example, Montana. Montana works. Great state. People are going to pick up from California and move to Montana. You think that by virtue of them being in Montana, it's a matter of them being within the arbitrarily socially constructed boundaries of the Montana jurisdiction, that they're suddenly going to perpetuate the Montana way of life? How does that make any sense? Is it in the air? Is it in the food? What about being within these drawn lines on the map makes Californians suddenly able to create a nice place to live? Well, Nothing. Nothing does that. So they're not going to. They're going to move to Montana, and they're going to wreck Montana. And then what do you think is going to happen there? You think they're going to say, oh, well, I guess we're up here in the mountains now. Guess we got to figure it out. They're going to pack up their bags, and then it's on to the next. Then they're going to move to Idaho. And they're going to say, wow, but everyone's talking about Idaho. Idaho's got low taxes, and their city's beautiful, and they've got live music, and, oh, it's amazing. They're going to pick up their bags, and then they're going to move to Idaho. And then, okay, and this is a process which will just be repeated throughout this century. And there will be nowhere else to go, because if there's somewhere to go, they're going to go there. If there is some place that is untouched by their dirty hands, if there is some place that is untouched by their sloppy and incompetent and dirty handiwork, then they're going to find it. And then they're going to come there, and then they're going to wreck it, no matter how isolated, no matter how remote, how small. Even it almost works in the reverse. The smaller, the lesser known, the more that like rich yuppies are going to find it and turn it into a tourist destination, and then it's going to be subject to an onslaught of internal migration. All of this is to say, this is why what is required here is some kind of totalizing solution. You understand that you can't run forever. At a certain point, we're going to have to make our stand. At a certain point. Not now, because we're still gathering strength. But when are people going to realize that at some point there will be nowhere left to go in your city? There will be nowhere left to go in your state. There will be nowhere left to go in your region. There will be nowhere left to go in this country. There will be nowhere left to go in the world. Nowhere. Think about this. Think about this. There will be nowhere left to go in the entire world that is not like California, that's not like LA. There will be nowhere in the entire world that you could go to that's not like DC or like New York City or like Beijing. Not going to be some city that's filthy, covered in smog, filled with crime, corrupt, poor, inefficient, trains don't run on time, shelves are not stocked with what you need, violent, disease, poverty everywhere, fecal matter. I mean, that's just par for the course. There won't be one place on earth that isn't like this where an average person can just get by. Because don't get me wrong, there will always be places for rich people to live everywhere. There will always be places for rich people to live everywhere in the world, whether you live in China or America or LA or Brazil. I mean, the rich people are always going to be fine. You know what they do in LA? They just go to some place that is so expensive that no one else could possibly live there. No one else has any business breathing in that zip code. That's what they do. To live in LA, you've got to be, or Manhattan, or anywhere for that matter. And so they build up. They live in a high-rise luxury apartment in the sky. And they get shuttled around by private security, private drivers to private places they can afford. So it's really not a matter of that. It's really about us. There will be no place in the world that you could go to stake out a better life, an opportunity, and a decent quality of life for you and your family. Not in this country, not in the world. So what does that mean for us? It means that we are going to have to do one of two things. We have to reform our nation in its entirety, not go local. That's what people always say. Go local. Don't bother about politics. Go local. Go to your local whatever and get your local fresh produce and your local whatever, as if like they're on the moon or something, like they're in an underground fortress. Local this, local that. What does that even mean? Local meaning proximate to you. It's on a map. People can find it. Like you're hiding, like as if they're not going to find you. You know, I remember a few years ago, my friend Millennial Matt was living up in Idaho, and he said, don't mention that we're in Idaho on your show. We don't want people to know about it. Not know about it. They can't look at a fucking map, you know? And I think they were being a little tongue-in-cheek, but point is, there is nowhere you can run. Now, you can buy yourself time, and that should not be understated. I mean, you can buy yourself time. And you know, there's a value in that. Buying time for you and your family, get your kids out of school and everything, get them raised. If you have 20 years and buy 20 years of time, that's valuable. But in terms of permanent solutions, in terms of permanently or, nothing's permanent, but in terms of any kind of long-term benefit for the country, long-term reform for the country, it's not good enough. We are going to have to either change the entire country, or we're going to have to chart a new course, or we're going to have to get in a state and close the borders, get in a certain place and say you can't come here anymore. Because that's the only thing that's going to prevent this from happening, because the South is coming to the North globally. And people from California are coming to Montana. And so there's nowhere that you can run and hide so long as there's freedom of movement for just anybody and anyone to pick up and move around. And there is. Insofar as there's trains and planes and everything's cheap, and as long as there's this jurisdiction, as long as people can have their American citizenship and just go anywhere they want, and even have Section 8 imposed on certain places, even if they can't afford it. So either we're going to have to change the rules for the whole country, or there's going to have to be a different country, or we're going to have to go to a country or make a country where something like that can happen. And then, when you talk about the latter option, that's something that I think will be viable in the long-term future. Because in order for that to happen, that involves, at the very least, a political challenge to the American government. And that won't be possible until America is no longer a global hegemon. So that fortunately may happen within this century, but that won't happen until at least the latter half of it. But that's how we have to think about these problems. And this is illustrative of that. If they could ruin California, they could ruin everything. And make no mistake about it, California was ruined. California didn't start out like this. California was untamed wilderness, and then we came along and we built, well, not my ancestors, but my ancestors came to Chicago, but settlers came to California and they built it up. America and Americans came and they built up California, specifically Europeans, and some Chinese and some Mexicans, but mostly Europeans came and they built Los Angeles and they built San Francisco and they built all these great places. And they're being ruined. It's not an accident. It's not happening passively. It's happening actively. People are coming there, and by their actions, they are diminishing the place. They are destroying and not building. They're worsening and not bettering. It's going in the wrong direction. And if they could do it to California, it's possible anywhere. California is connected to the ocean. Kansas is not. California is huge. Kansas is not as big. It doesn't have as many people. California's got all kinds of resources. Kansas has some, but mostly rural. So if California can get completely destroyed, you think Kansas stands a chance? You think Arkansas stands a chance? Or Idaho or Montana? If they could destroy California, they'll take out anything. And they will, because they can go there. They just hop in a car, take a plane, buy a house, and then they just get over there. And they vote in all the wrong politicians, and they're going to tank those places. And pretty soon, this is going to happen all over the world. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in every European country. And next, what they're going to pressure is for the East Asian countries like Japan and South Korea to take immigrants. And I hope that they'll stand strong. I'm not even going to go to Japan. I would never even do that, because I would not want to even pollute their country by being there. That's a Japanese place. That's their place. And I hope that they can protect it. And just so that for the sake of humanity, for the sake of the world, there's one place that isn't trash. There's one place that isn't a trash continent filled with garbage. Garbage in the air and water, and garbage in the streets, and garbage in the alleys, and everywhere. But that's what's going to happen. Every corner of the globe. And this is the lesson that we have to learn from our parents. White flight after the MLK riots. People picked up and went to the suburbs and said, okay, we're safe. Well, you're not, and you're never going to be safe. As long as you're white and you create something desirable, you're not safe. We have to start building some walls. We have to get medieval. Seriously. For our country, and if not for our country, for something, for some polity. We have got to get medieval. It's going to be like World War Z. We're going to have to build up giant stone or concrete walls with turrets. And we're going to have to carve out a little lantern of civilization and an entire sea of trash. It's just trashy, really. because that's kind of what the world is. America and Europe used to be a nice place that some immigrants could come and escape to. And now the immigrants are tipping the whole thing over. It's like a life raft. We could take 1 or 2 people. Okay, here, we'll help you out. You're drowning in the trash planet. Okay, well, we got 3 people. Oh, and your teddy bear and your little kid. Okay, we could bring them too. And now they're tipping over the life raft. And now everyone's going to drown. That's how you have to think of it. We're in like a giant ark floating in a world ocean. And we start helping people out of the water, and they're just pouring in. Now, we could take a few, and we always have. And the population's growing, and maybe one of them's Albert Einstein or whatever. But you can't bring in 2 million a year for 30 years. You can't bring in 100 million people in 30 years. Because 100 million people are going to sink the life raft, and then everyone's going to be drowning. Everyone's going to be treading water. And the water's going to be dirty, and it's going to smell bad. So that's California. That's the recall. Newsom is going to be recalled, or at least they'll hold the election. They're going to vote on that, whether to keep him or remove him, and then who's going to replace him. And the Republicans have already put up Caitlyn Jenner. So it's going to get even better. Very optimistic about that. We'll have Caitlyn Jenner in California. We'll have Andrew Yang in New York City. This is going to work just fine. I have high hopes for the future. Hey, at least we're not socialist, right? Thank God for that. At least we don't have big government. We need big government. We need big government, but to do the things that we need big government to do. We need a Putin-like dictator in America to make the corporate interests beholden to us, to keep the immigrants out, to fight back against the globalist institutions. We need somebody like Putin to come in, a strong leader, to serve and reign for like 25 years, unopposed and uncontested, and to just be competent and rule in the interest of the people. And then after that, maybe America can be great again. Maybe America can be on the right track. But anything short of that's not going to work. So that's California. I want to move on. I want to talk about the Bush amnesty here. The Bush amnesty deal